Hello students, today we are going to talk about T.S. Eliot, his life and some of his works in brief. Thomas Stearns Eliot, T.S. Eliot, was born on 26 September 1888 in St. Louis, Missouri, USA, and he died on 4th January 1965 in London, England. Eliot's later conservatism can be traced back to the conservative side of his grandfather's personality. That is, he was born in a conservative family, and his grandfather was a Unitarian minister, a graduate from Harvard Divinity School. Unitarianism actually was a Christian theological movement where it was believed that God is one person, as opposed to the Trinity, which in most other branches of Christianity defines God as one being in three persons: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Whereas the Unitarians, they believed that there was only one God, and the Son, that is Christ, no doubt was divine, but not God, and the Holy Spirit was also different from God. Eliot thought it a very good beginning for any child to be brought up to reverence such institutions like the church, the city, and the university. That is, from the very beginning, he was made to believe or have faith in the church, the city, and the university, and to be taught that personal and selfish aims should be subordinated to the general good which they represent. His father was a businessman, and he didn't approve of his decision of settling in England. That is, he wanted to move to England in order to realize his literary aims or his literary ambitions, but to this desire of his father objected to. His mother, Charlotte, had a strong sense of duty and moral responsibility and was involved in social work throughout her life. She wrote a memoir of her father-in-law, which she dedicated to her children, lest they forget. She also wrote didactic poems full of religious fervor, which seem to anticipate Eliot's preoccupation with spiritual drought, martyrdom, and faith, and the traditional religious themes and images of his mother's poems he later transforms in his own poems. Eliot had a remarkably happy childhood, but nevertheless he found his austere Unitarian upbringing quite oppressive. Eliot testifies that some of the authors disapproved for his reading during childhood. That is, when he was a child, some of the authors were forbidden for him to read, but this fact all the more added to the pleasure of reading them. And these were some of the authors that he read secretly: Byron, Shelley, Omar Khayyam, Rossetti, Swinburne, Ernest Dowson, etc. Then he later entered Harvard in 1906, and there he was influenced greatly by Irving Babbitt and George Santayana. Both advocated classicism and tradition as opposed to romanticism, liberalism, and the notion of progress. Though Eliot later disagreed with Babbitt on a number of important issues, but still the central concepts of his thought continued to have a major influence on him. And these were the importance of tradition, the necessity for the poet and critic of mediating between the past and the present. That is, the poet and critic need to act as mediators between the past and the present. The unification of thought and feeling. That is, he believed that there should not be a dissociation of sensibilities. Rather, there should be a unification of thought and feelings. Thoughts and feelings should go together. They should be fused together in a work of art. And the opposition between classicism and romanticism. Reading Baudelaire in his second year at Harvard, Eliot learned from him the poetical possibilities of the more sordid aspect of the modern metropolis, of the possibility of fusion between the sordidly realistic and the phantasmagoric. Phantasmagoric, that is something in a dream or created by the imagination, having a fantastic or deceptive appearance. So there was a possibility he found uh, through Baudelaire that there could be a juxtaposition of the matter of fact, that is realistic, and the fantastic. Eliot was further influenced by Arthur Symons's The Symbolist movement in literature. Symons defined symbolism as a form of expression for an unseen reality apprehended by the consciousness. However, it was Lefort who enabled Eliot to find his own poetic voice. In Lefort, he found a temperament similar to his own and learned from him that the sort of experience that an adolescent had had in an industrial city in America could be the material for poetry. He was indebted to him for his use of the interior monologue and verse libre. Most significantly, most significant influence on T.S. Eliot was that of Dante. It was Dante who exercised the most persistent and deepest influence on Eliot's verse. In his tribute to Dante, he explained that he borrowed lines from Dante in an attempt to arouse in the reader's mind the memory of some Dante's scene, and thus establish a relationship between the medieval inferno and modern life. So that is medieval hell that is described by Dante, and the modern life, modern man's life, that is also as good as hell. Eliot also read several works on psychology, mysticism, and theology, so he was a well-read person. While at Harvard, he began to study Sanskrit, Pali, and Indian philosophy. He read the classical texts, including the Bhagavad Gita, sacred books of Buddhism, a study of Patanjali. He acknowledged that his poetry showed an influence of Indian thought and sensibility. References, images, and themes from his study of Indian literature and philosophy recur in his critical and creative work by way of analogy, comparison, or congruity. In 1916, he had finished a dissertation entitled Knowledge and Experience in the Philosophy of F.H. Bradley, but he couldn't return to Harvard to take the final oral examination for his PhD degree. In 1914, Eliot met and began a close association with the American poet Ezra Pound, to whom he has dedicated his poem The Wasteland. In June 1915, Eliot married Vivian Hay Wood, daughter of a painter, and she herself was a painter, ballet dancer, and a writer. But both seemed to have suffered a lot from this marriage because of their contrasting temperaments, recurrent financial problems, and Vivian's chronic illness. Eliot took several jobs as schoolmaster at High Wycombe Grammar School, Highgate Junior School, and later he joined he got the post in the foreign department at Lloyd's Bank in the city of London. He joined there. A great American English poet he was, a playwright, a literary critic, and editor. He was a leader of the modernist movement in poetry, exercising a strong influence on Anglo-American culture from early 20th century until his death in 1965. His experiments in diction, style, and versification, they revolutionized English poetry, and through a series of critical essays, he formulated and developed his own critical concepts shattering old orthodoxies and erecting new ones. The publication of The Wasteland in 1922 and four quartets in 1943 established him as the greatest living English poet and man of letters, and he acquired an international reputation. In 1948, he was awarded the Order of Merit, the highest British civil decoration, and the Nobel Prize for Literature. The following year, he married Valerie Fletcher, his devoted secretary, that is, who had been a devoted secretary to him for several years by now. And he says, without the satisfaction of this happy marriage, no achievement or honor could give me satisfaction at all. So the two only periods of happiness in his life, he claims to be, were during childhood and during his second marriage. These are a few notable works by T.S. Eliot. The first one, The Wasteland. This is the poem that's prescribed for you, and the poem is in 5 sections, and these sections speak about the wasteland of religion, in which there are rocks but no water, the wasteland of the spirit, from which all moral and spiritual springs have evaporated, the wasteland of the instinct for fertility, where sex has become merely a mechanical means of animal satisfaction rather than a potent life-giving source of regeneration. That is, the themes of futility, frustration, and the spiritual and physical barrenness of 20th century Western civilization are dealt with in the poem The Wasteland. Murder in the Cathedral is a verse drama performed in 1935, and it portrays the assassination of the Archbishop Thomas Becket in the Cathedral of Canterbury during the reign of Henry II in 1170. The Dry Salvages, Burnt Norton, East Cocker, and Little Gidding, they are poems in the 4 quartets. Burnt Norton is the first poem of Eliot's 4 quartets. He created it while working on his play Murder in the Cathedral, and it was first published in his collected poems 1909 to 1935. Then East Cocker, The Dry Salvages, and Little Gidding, they were written during World War II and the air raids that were going on in Great Britain. So, and these were published firstly as a series by Faber and Faber in Great Britain between 1940 and 1942. Then The Sacred Wood. This is a collection of 20 essays. It was first published in 1920, and in this collection there are collected the modernist essays on poetry and criticism. Then The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. This was his first professionally published poem by Eliot. It was first published in June 1915, and it is a variation on the dramatic monologue, where Prufrock, the prototype of a modern man, the speaker, he is in the poem, and he seems to be addressing a potential lover with whom he would like to force the moment to its crisis by somehow consummating their relationship. But he can't muster up enough courage and keeps on postponing the idea. Then there is Sweeney Agonistis, and this is the first attempt, or Eliot's first attempt at writing a verse drama, and it is in 2 scenes that is published in 2 parts in the New Criterion, and this could not be completed, so only 2 scenes are there. Then his quarterly review, The Criterion, where was the most distinguished international critical journal of the period, and it came out from 1922 to 39. Also, he was director or working editor of the publishing house of Faber and Faber Limited from the early 1920s until his death, and he was a general patron of young poets. So this is all for today. Thank you so much.